Hello. Yeah, morning, ma'am.
Good morning. How are you, sir?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great.
All your results are over or not?
One paper is still left. Ma'am is checking. I am following up with her.
Maximum
We
volume. Oh,
have
okay,
to
okay.
declare it, Monday, Tuesday,
Oh,
and we have our convocation is on 5th May.
I know, I have seen that mail.
Will you be coming, sir?
No, no.
Ah,
Very difficult. Very, very difficult.
difficult. Okay, okay.
So you're all busy.
Yes, I'm just making you the host, sir. You can
Yeah,
see,
yeah.
you can share the screen.
Okay, okay. Yeah, yeah, it is enabled. It is enabled, yeah. Fine, fair enough. So saw that there's a class at 10 o'clock again today. So I have to close it just on time.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. It's a whole day today up to 7:30 you have classes.
Today, yes, is very hectic because Radhakrishnan sir, has to, he'll be traveling, and we just left 3, 4 Sundays now
Okay,
because assignments will be rolled out by this month end, go up to May, mid May end, then June we have the assessments also.
okay, okay.
So it's very jam packed.
I know, I have seen everything is back to back. I know. Yeah.
Yeah, classes are back to back. Convocation is, although it was planned, but finally invitation, everything went yesterday. So like been very, very this till May 5th, May 10th, hectic hoga.
I know, I understand. You're all really busy.
It's sometimes good to be busy because at least you are moving.
But then you also need some time for family and other social engagements.
Yeah, because every Sunday goes, and since morning it goes.
I know your all Sundays of yours are gone.
Yeah, all Sundays are gone.
Yeah, yeah,
And
correct.
weekdays, even if you want to take a break, people will keep calling you.
Yeah, I mean that doesn't work actually. It is. It's a misnomer that you can take a break on
Uh,
weekdays working on a Sunday. It doesn't work.
yeah.
True. So, but anyway, I think an organization needs this kind of committed people. Otherwise, the organization cannot function.
Correct, correct. Okay, sir. I'm moving
Yeah.
to the other batch.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Great.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah. Good morning, Mayurima.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Fine. Thank you. How are you?
Good, good.
You are the only one right now on the call. I hope others will join soon.
Of
We
course, of
just have,
course. So, yeah, so I think today we have classes right till 7:30 in the night.
that's what I was telling her. Classes jam packed.
Yeah. And I think with everybody working all through Monday to Friday, I guess Sunday will take a bit easy. But yeah, I will send a message in our WhatsApp group so that people can start
Yeah.
logging in. Just give me a
Yeah.
minute, sir. Yeah.
It's a really demanding task, right? Yeah.
But then we have chosen it, so I guess there is no complaint about it.
I know you have chosen, but then initial enthu over a period of time comes down.
It does, it does. So just give me a minute. Let me WhatsApp in the group so that people just log in.
Sure, sure.
think some people should be joining. I have messaged in the group.
Yeah, I think they're trickling in.
So you're based out of Bangalore.
Yeah. No, I think 8:30 is a little too early in any case. On a Sunday morning,
Yeah.
uh, people would like to wake up a little leisurely and get into this kind of thing. Ideally, we should start at 10 so
Yeah.
that,
No, so typically, certain last semester we used to start at 10 only. But I
yes.
think this time, because we have electives and there is like sometimes the classes do overlap, like research and talent, they go hand in hand at 2 in the afternoon always. Or
Hmm.
sometimes we have this paper and research going hand in hand in the morning. So somewhere there has to be some bit of adjustment because otherwise we can't have all the sessions.
I
Uh,
agree I agree with you. But it is commendable, all of you while working, you're able to go through this course and all is excellent.
Thank you so much. I guess it's a bit stretch, but as I was saying that we have volunteered for it. Might as well get it done.
In a manner of speaking, you're all lucky. You all have this support system. When I did this diploma way back in 2010, I didn't have any such, opportunity to attend classes and all that.
Ah,
Every
yeah.
own preparation and going and giving.
Correct, correct.
And you also have the online exam. You have to go and sit in the hall and write 3 hours continuously. You know,
But I think
plus,
so somewhere that also pushed people to study well. Here there is online, so there's a lot of reluctance in okay, how do I do it? And you're still writing. I mean, even if it's online, you're on camera and you're writing it physically.
I know. Yeah, but going and writing in the exam hall for 3 hours at that time, no, for about 20 years or so,
Yeah,
that's
would have been, yeah,
it was, we were all used to only signing, not writing by that time.
writing. Correct. But I think now it's worse. So we all only used to typing. So now writing is again a problem.
I know. I I think I don't know whether you all have the software for dictating so that it types, the machine types, if that is
Yeah.
there.
We have, yeah. Nowadays, I think even basic things like Word will have a dictate version. So that is
Then you,
good.
then you don't have to type, you just
Dictated,
speak,
yes.
speak and then it goes. Yeah. So, good morning to everyone. I was just telling Mayuri ma'am that, it's commendable that you guys have all worked for the whole week and still you're coming to the classes on Sunday. So, it is quite appreciable. So, welcome you all to this sixth session on development center management. And today is a very important session, so to say, because we are transiting from the uh, technical and leadership competencies which are essential for any assessment or development center purpose, and then moving to actually what a development center is and what an assessment center is. So that is why it is very important. So I think others may join as we continue. I think we should start. Do you all have any first-hand experience with either assessment center or a development center? Any one of you?
So I have, as a part of my TIS course, when I did my executive program there, we
Uh-huh.
were we were a part of development center. In the sense, I was a participant in the development center as a part of our OD class, and we were all coached on very limited. It was a 2 day thing. So how a development center runs and how the assessment happens. So, but we were participants. So basically, we participated in activities, and then we got a feedback, and they were observers. So that's the limitation. I mean, that's the limited experience I've got.
And how big was the batch size then?
About 45 people.
45 people. And how many SSS were there?
We had about 6 of them.
6 of them. Was it in Bombay?
Yeah, in this campus in Mumbai.
Mumbai. Okay, okay. Yeah, I'm still used to Bombay because it has been internalized so much. Mumbai transition is still not happening.
Difficult, yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So anybody else? None of you have any first-hand exposure to assessment center or development center? Jagannath, you must be having in your organization. It's a big organization.
Yes, sir. It is the big organization, but like assessment center, I have not yet exposed to. Assessment center, what I have read in the study material and all that. That's what I asked last time also, as to assessment center and development center. Assessment center, we have got our management development center set up in Borivali, Mumbai, wherein, like I mentioned you, I am Professor TV Rao. He has introduced this 360 degrees feedback, and he introduced actually that assessment part for the people who will be promoted to the leadership roles, like say for example senior divisional manager who will be in charge of the division. Say for example, right now I am posted in Jabalpur, so it is covering a huge area of a total circumference of around 300 kilometers. So the branches, 21 branch offices located in, so he will be in charge of that. So people who will be chosen for these leadership positions, they had to undergo that program, one assessment program. And like I mentioned last time also, they used to see the history of that person since from childhood, as to how he was been abroad and so many things. So basically the question is whether the person will be able to lead the team of people or not, team of leaders, whether the person will be able to lead the leaders. And that is important for our sector, like while you are being posted in such kind of position. Thank you.
Okay, okay, wonderful. Thank you. I think let's go through we have very limited time and there's a lot to discuss. And therefore, I think though there is not a part of the syllabus, I want to first give you the concept of assessment center and development center and what differentiate these two. I mean, why you have two different types of concepts and what is the applicability. I think that understanding is very, very important, though in our course material, it focuses only on the development center, but I thought it is important for you to understand, and rest of it is all related to development center. Now, what is an assessment center? Basically, assessment centers are usually a third-party centers. Not many organizations will have internal assessment centers or development centers, except the large ones. There are private, centers which are set up by some experts in that field, and they either have their own regular evaluators or they may even have consultants. I think one of the reasons why this course has been introduced in diploma program is because most of you will be involved in executive training, and executive training basically is related to the development center activity. You will not be involved as a part of L&D in the recruitment and selection process, and therefore assessment center is left out of the syllabus. Probably the assumption is that it will be more relevant for the HR fraternity, and therefore that has been left out. Now, what is an assessment center? Basically, both of them are functions are similar, but application and usage are different. So it is a combination of selection tools. Wherever you go to an assessment center, the concerned participants will be put through some kind of testing or assessment, and based on the outcomes of that, certain decisions are made. In the case of assessment center, it is basically either you are in or out of the organization. That is a pass or a fail in your assessment. That is mainly used for the recruitment purpose. But that said, sometimes the assessment centers can also be used to take decisions on the promotions for the candidates. So you can refer a set of candidates to an assessment center. These people will go through the assessment center, and the confidential report will come to the concerned HR department or the line managers, and they will take a decision whether somebody is ready for promotion or not. But assessment center will give you what we call the gaps in the candidate. So what does it basically mean? When you send somebody to an assessment center, you obviously have to share the information related to the competencies required, which again is related to the job analysis and job description job the specifications have to be shared. So the concerned assessment center should first know what are the competencies that are required for the job, if it is recruitment, or for the job, if you are considering some people for promotion. So the concerned center will make an assessment using multiple tools and multiple assessors on where this person stands in terms of the existing competencies versus the desired or the required competencies, and make an assessment of the gap. And if the gap is not much, the organization can take a decision to either recruit or promote a person. If the gap is considerable, you will not recruit, and then it is a failed situation for the candidate or reject situation for the candidate. And if it is a promotion, probably you will identify since you have identified the gaps and you want to give a career path for the individual, you can use the data of assessment center for referring the candidate to a development center for closing the gap in the competencies, so that in the coming future, maybe a year or two later, the concerned person can probably be able to be ready for the next level of promotion. So what are those things that you will make an assessment in the assessment center? All those qualities that you require for taking a new management trainee or an engineer trainee in an organization, such as, how creative you are, or whether you've got the ability to solve problems, how good are you at your communication skills, decision-making skills, leadership skills, and all. So these are all the common things that need to be assessed for any job, and therefore those are all assessed. Now, how will you do it? How will you do it is you will use multiple tools. Typically, any assessment center or development center has to depend on multiple tools, multiple assessors, and the same competency being tested on multiple tools, because you want to reconfirm, you want to be sure that the competency is there with the person who is being considered for a particular post. So the focus of assessment center is primarily individual, whereas the development center is related to much more than that. We will come to that, right? So it also requires your assessment center should have trained people, both who are trying to observe the behaviors of the persons and come to some kind of conclusion about the person's behavior, and also the other skills and the cognitive skills, etc., that the person has. Now, what kind of selection methods do you use? Selection methods do not significantly differ between this assessment center and development center. They can use work samples, simulations, interviews, and psychometric tests. Now, psychometric tests are commonly used for certain purposes, and interviews are 100%. They are used by and large. That is the most common way of doing it. Simulations are primarily used in the development center for these senior positions. It may not be required for all the positions. Maybe at the entry level, you may not require so much of simulations, but at a mid to senior levels, you require more of simulations. And work samples, again, depends on the nature of the job that you're looking at. But both the development centers and assessment centers use those techniques. Now, what does it mean? What do the work samples include? I'm sure all of you know what are the in-basket or inter activities, then role plays, analytical and report writing activities, group discussions, and any group activities. All these things are basically conducted with a view to make observations about the candidate's competencies, so that his fitness into the organization is assessed, and you will only take those who are fit to be in that position. What are those? If you want to do this, obviously there must be some basics in place in the assessment center. We will next discuss about the development center. Now, you have to have standardized methods, because you're comparing people from one person to the other person to make decisions by the organizations, which are basically commercial in nature, and they are taking them for success on the job. So unless you have some kind of standardized methods, it becomes difficult to compare. And these methods have to be obviously very fair, and they have to be consistent, right? And then you need to do it with multiple people, because you will get multiple perspectives and you can cross-check one perspective to the other so that you don't miss out on anything, and then you are sure that whatever the decision that you're taking is a sort of foolproof. And you must also use multiple methods, because in one method, you may not be able to capture the profile of all the competencies of a person and the consistency of those competencies in multiple situations. Therefore, you must also use multiple methods. And feedback is an essential component. I mean, at the end of the assessment, I think the candidate rightly deserves. In the case of recruitment, you may not be able to share the report with the concerned person, because it's supposed to be within the organization, and you fund this the assessment center cost, and you keep it for your records. You may not be able to give it to the concerned person, but it all depends. If you want to still share it with the person and for his benefit, you may not recruit somebody, but you may still give it to the person. That all depends on your policy of the organization. But then once you share it, people get into some argumentative mode. Therefore, some organizations do not prefer sharing it. Now, the question is, at the end of this, you will have a report of the candidate, which will give you what are his strengths and weaknesses, and what are the areas for his improvement, and how he can be professionally developed, so that in the case of promotions, you can use this report for referring the candidate to a development center. Yes, sir. Jagannath ji.
Like, sir, assessment and feedback, we can take this as the two extremes. Assessment is from one side, feedback is from another side. How open the candidates or even the assessors are about receiving those feedback and assessment. So, though I think the whole success depends on that. So, what has been your experience regarding this? Whether the participants are ready or open to accept the assessment by multiple assessors like mentioned in this slide, at the same time whether the assessors are in a position to accept the feedback whatever the participants are giving to them, and how this journey takes us to the thorough development. Thank you.
Okay, that's a good question. See, the whole issue is about the credibility of the assessment process, how you are perceived to be unbiased, objective, and absolutely fair. If I consider that whatever the processes you're putting me through is following these basic principles, then the concerned person will at least believe that I'm going to get a decent feedback. Number one. Number two, I think that in the entire feedback, there are two, three important things. How the feedback is provided is more important than the feedback itself. The feedback giver has to be extremely trained and empathetic to the candidate, and the candidate should perceive that it is incredibly beneficial to him. Even if he is rejected, he should still feel that he is being rejected on fair means, and whatever the process that he has gone through is going to benefit him for his future needs. He can build on them. So the whether people are open, I think when you are interested, when your purpose is to develop somebody and you are able to communicate, I am interested in you and therefore I am sharing it with you for your benefit and for your growth, there is a good chance that people will be open to listening to you. But then the method of giving the feedback, the time of giving the feedback, the environment in which it is being given is all important in the feedback mechanism. Yeah, you have something to say.
Yeah, what is more required and what Professor TV Rao has advocated about the 360 degrees, but people in the Indian scenario or typically in our case public sector scenario, they are not much open to receive these 360 degrees as to all the people, your peers, your subordinates as well as your superiors. If your superiors give your feedback, yes, you have to, मतलब बोलते हैं मजबूरी है कि भाई लेना ही पड़ेगा. But while it is from the peers and from subordinates, it's become very difficult for the person to accept and digest, more than accept, digest that feedback. So, from that point of view, how these assessment centers will help. Thank you.
No, there is a difference. There is a difference between what we do in the organizations as 360-degree feedback and what an assessment center is doing. An assessment center is an independent external body to the organization, then there is no reason for anybody to suspect their motives and their honesty. Why 360-degree feedback does not work in the organization? Because we are not considered to be meritocratic organization. We are the whole credibility of the appraisal process in most of the organization is suspect. Many organizations you will keep hearing that the decisions about the promotions and transfers and increments have already been made. Rest of the process is done just to justify or document what they are doing. Right? That is the basic problem with us. It is not that, these processes are wrong. The processes are good, but the implementing people are the problem. That is why credibility and trust are two important things. And hence, whether it is assessment center or development center, I think if they are within the organization, it is people can look at them with some, suspicion whether they are being manipulated to accept some outcomes which have already been predetermined. But if it is an external body, obviously they don't have to be, governed by any organizational requirements. If you consider them to be fair, I'm sure people will be willing to listen to that. So don't compare the 360-degree feedback that is done or appraisal that is done in organization for the purpose of determining the promotions, rewards, and increments, and etc. Here it is completely a very, very objective, and therefore here you also have multiple people. They are all experts in the area of their specialization. They are not your peers or subordinates or some external customers and things like that. They're all supposed to be people who have been working in that area for a long period of time and they know what they're doing. So that I think is the basic difference that we must note in this case. Now that is what is about the
Very, very true, sir. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Right.
Yeah, very
I think
true. Like we have one saying, we have one saying in Marathi, "Sonarani can't toचले," which means if the goldsmith pierce your ears, then it is you will accept it. If your mother, father, or maybe your
I agree. I agree.
thank you much.
Yeah, yeah. So I think in feedback, one important thing is the giver is very, very important. And the context and the environment which you are giving is even more important. All these factors make a difference in terms of how the people take it. Now, coming back to the development center, I think if you go through the history, and that is what, the Chanakya comes in most of these discourses because he had gone to take revenge at that point in time, and therefore he wanted to develop a certain kingdom and a king, and therefore it is said that he has followed the kind of model that we are talking about way back in 3rd century for recruiting the people for his kingdom, right? And that is what made him successful, though he never became the king, but then he was able to ultimately achieve his goal. But most of these, the current techniques which have been talked about in the current form of development center or assessment center have developed during the world wars. Because what happens in a war period is, in a short time, you need to develop several skilled people to face the war field. And therefore, at that point in time, how the army or any of the defense forces will recruit the right kind of people so that they can be deployed in the field in a very short time and come back successfully, made people to develop some of these tools and techniques which we are discussing as a course, and subsequently the corporates have actually owned it up and some of them are using. Now, as far as the process is concerned, it was first Germany which is said to have developed these kinds of centers, and then that has moved on to the Britain, and then Indian Army initially started. Indian Army, I think, in the Services Selection Board still uses these things, and they have 3 phases of recruitment in Indian Army. They have first interview, they use interviews, psychometric tests, and also some outdoor activities. Some of them are which are group activities, so that they are able to assess the competencies of the potential candidates to be recruited in the defense forces, and then that has been helping them for a long time, and that they still continue to hold. So now let us understand what is it development center, and then we will understand what are the differences between AC and DC. Now, it is very similar to AC, but the focus here is not recruitment or promotion. The focus is to identify the development needs of individuals. So whether it is AC or DC, you are talking about always a group of people, not one individual. You are looking at making an assessment of your existing staff and then see what their development needs are and then plan for their training and development so that they are prepared for future roles. So it also means that the development center should have clear understanding of the job roles, job analysis, and then the competencies required for those jobs. So who gives all that information? The concerned department or the line managers, they give these competencies. The more clearer those competencies are, better equipped you are at the development center. So here you are basically looking at putting people through a certain processes and then coming out with a customized plan for their development, which we discussed in the previous classes, the individual development plan or the IDP. Now, who has to take the responsibility? In the case of assessment center, because you are taking either a new person into your organization or you are considering somebody for a promotion, the responsibility largely lies on the organization. Whereas in the development center activities, though the processes are conducted by the development center staff or the people involved in that, the experts involved in the DC, but the plan is made for the individual and therefore individual has to assume higher responsibility as far as the development process is concerned, right? And in terms of the exercise, more or less it is the same, except that you will use more simulations. You know, if you want to identify somebody for a leadership role, you will have to obviously, give some case study and ask them to perform as if he is performing that particular role of a leader, right? And that gives you a clear idea of what these competencies are. You know, I'm sure you would have read in the succession planning. Obviously, you will not consider only one person for a successor for a particular role. So you would have probably 5 or 6 people, and these 5, 6 people will go through, let us say, a development center process. In the process, they will go through several projects, several assessment criteria, and the confidential reports come, and you will make who is the best out of these 5 so that that person can be considered to be a successor. So that is the kind of work that is done. And therefore, by definition, assessment center happens faster because you have to take a decision about either in or out, pass or fail. Whereas in development center, you are not failing anybody. You are walking the talk, you are training the people, you are making them lifelong learners, you are preparing for them for a longer role in the organization. Therefore, the kind of time and investment that you are making in the development center and the people who are going through the development center processes is much higher than what it is in the assessment center. In both, in all these, as I said earlier, we will definitely use some psychometric tools which are well tested, but then they have to be used by the trained, certified behavioral scientists or the people who are capable of doing it. Not everybody should use it, and then interviews are a part of it. Now, the key features of a development center, you should know what you're measuring at the individual competencies, and different people will give multiple lessons will give multiple perspectives. From that, you should be able to make a meaning and say this is the development need of an individual. And you are looking at the current skills and competencies, and you are trying to project them for a future role and future requirements. Therefore, you should know how to draw the development career path for the individual, and then the individual concerned with the support of the organization should be able to achieve that so that in your future roles, you are successful. I think as some of you have said, that feedback and coaching is very important. And the feedback, as long as it is focused on the competencies, not on the person per se, and you are able to demonstrate that you are interested in the individual for their growth, I'm sure feedback will be positively taken and people will definitely improve their performance. Then individual IDPs have to be drawn and they have to be reviewed and periodically, and necessary support has to be given to ensure that the individual goes through those prescriptions made during the development center processes, and the individual concerned has to believe that it is important for him to have ongoing learning process for growing in the organization. Now, there are some misconceptions about, in many organizations, I know we just want to show that we are complying without without following in word and spirit. I think that the spirit part of it is important, but in most organizations, we just do it for the purpose of showing it rather than implementing it in real spirit. So some of the misconceptions about development centers are: a set of instruments with one or two psychometric tests is not a development center. So that is what I think, differentiates between a credible development center versus a development center which is for the namesake. So it has to be thoroughly designed. The experts have to be involved. They must understand the roles, responsibilities, and what are the kinds of competencies required, which means they should be backed by the job design requirements or job analysis data. And then they have to customize for each job role the test exercises, simulations, or the interview questions, whatever is required, so that the outcome is useful to both individual as well as the organization. So set of interviews the development center for the sake of it. I think most of the interviews, let me tell you honestly, they're all stereotyped. We really do not have many people go and participate in the interviews because they are required to participate, and not that they have been trained to interview people for certain roles. So that again has to be well designed and integrated into the requirement of the organization. Psychometric tests, there are some psychometric these days with the internet age. Most of these things are some form or the other. They are available. Either they are fully tested or there are partial of some tested psychometric tests. We think that we can simply download and use, because if you want to do a proper testing method, it costs you money per head. It costs you so much. You'll have to pay the charges for that, and organizations do not want to pay and they want to economize on that, and therefore they try to show as if they are doing, which is in reality it is not. Yes, sir. Jagannath ji.
Now, related to psychometric, now people have come up with the psychogeometric. Sir, can you have any throw some light on it? Psychogeometric. Today morning only I read about this or heard about this psychogeometric as to the person's personality type and whether that person will be able to communicate and connect to other people. Same with the psychometric, psychogeometric. If you can,
Okay,
thank you.
I'm not aware of this, but if you're talking about the
Okay.
personality types,
Yeah.
the
Yes, sir.
personality type tests are all well developed. But again, as I said, see, anything that is well developed, it is all, private property of some organization or some scientist, and they will all only license. But what happens in our organizations is, since the organizations do not want to invest money, they will try to manage with what is available in the public domain, and sometimes they are not even implemented by the experts in that field. That is not a genuine development, sir. That is all I wanted to share with you. Right?
Okay, sir. Thank you.
So if I may add, if it's okay.
Yeah.
So, so just to answer Jagannath's questions, this psychogeometric is basically a new type of a test. When I say new test, a variation to the various psychometric tests that you just referred to, sir. And they look at 5 shapes and they try and basically match your behavior with that shape. It's just a new battery of tests. I mean, I don't think they are going to be doing anything different. I think what they're doing is they match the shape with the traits of that shape, like a circle, a triangle, a rectangle, a square. and then they actually match your traits with that shape. So that's
No,
that's the
then it
beginning
is
and
only a sort of presentation, ma'am. I think it is
yes,
the
yes,
basic five tests are it remains the same,
yeah,
except that maybe the presentation somebody has improved using it using some IT tools.
correct.
But no, but the point I'm trying to make is many times you keep hearing that we do this test and that test. But are you doing it the way it has to be done is the basic question. And many often we find that this is not done in the right way. Then,
Completely agree, sir. Yeah, completely agree.
and you don't have a battery of people who will do this. Multiple assessors require, I mean, a proper assessment requires multiple assessors. And then again, cost is the criteria. In most of the organizations, the first thing is how much does it cost? Typically we want to cut down the cost, and most of the times L&D is considered to be a cost center, not a profit center, because you really do not know how to quantify the benefits of your investments in the L&D, and therefore organizations look for shortcuts how to reduce the cost, and therefore you reduce on you work on lesser number of people. Then work sample tests are not done, not DC, because they determine the person's know how he is doing his job. But then work samples have to also determine his competencies and how far our experts are able to decipher, observe, and decipher the competencies and rate them well is a question there. And when you do this, I think the basic question when Mr. Jagannath Kulkarni asked is whether people will be willing to take the feedback. If the feedback is given not on the person but on the performance or the competencies, people will be willing. And if it is multiple people, it's better because then you are sure that there will be some kind of a normalization done. If it is only one person giving the feedback and he has got some preconceived notion because he is already an internal part of the organization, that becomes very difficult and the feedback may not be palatable. The ugly part of any of these assessments is the results that you see in practice in the organization are contrary to what are the findings in these assessments. Somebody who is not having capabilities and competencies get promoted or get shortlisted for a training, and those persons who are perceived to be good at a certain competencies may not get the opportunity. So we are considered to be, mostly the organizations are perceived to be very unfair in our approach, and therefore this happens. Otherwise, not because of the processes. And observing multiple participants on one competency is also not a right approach to a development center. And building an institution cannot be a development center. You just showcase a physical infrastructure and put a development center for this organization and barely invest in the processes, the testing equipment or testing tools, and the people required does not make an organization to have a development center. So, in a sense, actually, the development center has the highest validation in measuring human competencies if designed well. The word is designed. No, you have to have proper people with proper investments, only then it works. Otherwise, the whole concept of development center or an assessment center may not work. Even if you are hiring some assessment center externally, and since anyway, hiring means you have a contract and you can call shots. And if somebody at the senior level says that, okay, so-and-so candidate has to be selected, therefore you manipulate the scores, then that doesn't work. You may think that, you can dictate terms, but then if they don't listen to you, they will lose the business. And if they listen to you, the process is defeated, the purpose is defeated. So these are all the practical considerations in the organizations. Now, let us understand what are those differences between assessment and development center. This is not there in the textbook. I have created this table with by referring to several material. So I'll just keep it here for a while. You read it, and then if you have any question, please ask me. I think it is very important to understand these two, the differences between these two. Yeah, please feel free to ask me questions. Or if you want to add something more to it also, I'll be very happy.
That was a movie of I think Priyanka Chopra, in which the same thing has been mentioned, type. So what we are thinking on whether the person is compatible or not. The same way whether the uh, employee is compatible or not with the organization. So that is all process of assessment center. I suppose it is there. What I think is after recruiting and after deploying the people in the organization or after putting them into some positions, then assessment is being done. It's better to do that pre-employment or pre-deployment rather. Then it would have been much, or it would be much more beneficial. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Anything? Any question?
Sir, I'm not getting a chance to read, so if 2 minutes can be given to read. Thank you.
You're not able to see the screen.
I'm not able to read because continuously somebody is talking, so I need to read this so as to ask questions.
Then we will pause for a while. Please read it, no issues.
So, sir, I think that both are the complementary to each other. What assessment center finds, the development center tries to fill it. The same is mentioned in competency gap. Uh, is output of assessment center, and filling of those gaps is the purpose of development center. Thank you.
Yeah. PIG, are you able to read?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, I think what the point that Mr. Jagannath Kulkarni said, both are complementary. It's really not so. Really not so. Development centers, not every assessment center is a development center and not every development center is an assessment center. The purpose of each one is different. It is just that organizations sometimes use the output of assessment for development of a person for promotions. It may be used for that purpose, but then they are not considered to be complementing each other. So you don't have, assessment center and the development center and everything gets complemented. No, not really. Not that way. But what happens is in a talent strived society. We have too many educated people, not enough talent. Unfortunately, the situation in India is that we've got many people who are educated, but then whether the talent is available or not, we do not have enough people who are talented. Now, in this situation, and if you are a leader and you have to run the business, you have to show the results to your organization, you have to find some ways to circumvent this talent shortage or that war for talent. And therefore, sometimes the organizations, managers use the outcomes of the assessment center, that is, which gives you the report on the gaps of the people, to identify those who can be trained for the future roles so that I don't have to be in a stage where a vacancy exists, but then I don't have the right kind of talent. So that way it can be used. Otherwise, the purposes of both are different. Now, development centers are much difficult to run because they require long-term perspective, more resources, and most important is the buy-in from the top management. So assessment centers people will accept because you are anyway going to recruit people. Recruitment is essential component of an organization, and probably it doesn't have any future costs, and therefore you don't mind spending some, and your money spent on that is more or less clear. This per candidate I have to spend so much. But in development center is not so. How much does it take? Each individual development plan is different, and each person requires different time frames, different competencies. The investments are more. Therefore, if you don't have the buy-in from the top management, and the leader who is heading the development center is not able to convince the people who are part of the interventions that the organization is planning and implementing the individual development plan, the whole thing can crumble, and therefore it is much more difficult to manage a development center than just running an assessment center. I hope I have made the point clear. We will move on.
Sir, so development center crucially comes after when it comes during the talent mapping part.
Yes, it's a part of the talent management, and which also is basically competency mapping requirement.
Okay, so this is, I mean, this is how it is differs from assessment center. We have a common conceptions that both assessment center and development center are the same. But now
No,
we can come to a conclusion that there is basic difference between assessment center and development center, where development center is categorically used for talent mapping or talent development, talent performance management, whereas the assessment center is being used for recruitment, some at times for promotion, for giving promotions to some candidates, and so on and so forth.
yes,
Thank you
true.
so much.
Very true. Very true.
So can we say that assessment is for talent acquisition and development is for talent development? Will that be okay?
Yeah, in a manner of speaking, yes. Assessment centers are mainly focused on the talent acquisition part, and therefore it is pass or fail. Either you are in or you are out. There is no further, discussion on that, by and large. Except that the caveat there is some managers are using this data for internal promotions because you are not able to source the right kind of people. For example, today's situation in the market is that IT companies, they don't need the traditional talent anymore. The software developers or the CSE graduates of engineering colleges, which they used to take in thousands of numbers and keep some of them on benches and all that. That situation has completely changed. Many companies, the competency requirements of IT companies have completely changed, and they don't have the right kind of people. So engineering college, if you ask me, many engineering colleges really do not even know what kind of a talent is required by these IT companies. So they have been producing the same BTech CSE graduates, and the consequence is, including the IITs, you have about 30-35% not placed graduates in the current year. But why does that happen? That is because the company's competency requirements have changed. They have not been translated, the new competencies have not been translated to the academic inputs, and therefore there's a massive gap between these two. And who does this? How will you do it? That is partly, I think it's a collective responsibility of both the industry and the academic institutions. But what is important to understand here is that assessment centers are going to, the relevance of assessment centers in future probably will increase because the jobs are becoming more and more highly focused in certain competencies. It's no longer that I will take, I will give you an example. When I joined a multinational company some years ago, for 1 year, for one full year, I was on training. I was asked to travel to different departments, different locations across the country, and then I have been put through some coveted management training programs, all that. One full year, I did not do any routine managerial function. I was in the knowledge acquisition about that particular industry specific to that company, and sometimes some projects were done. What they were doing is some kind of competency mapping. I was being assessed by multiple managers from multiple locations, from multiple perspectives, and multiple competencies. And all this dossier was going to the central HR in that company, and a profile of me was being created there. The most of these top class companies are the blue chip companies. They have this system of creating your profiles and mapping your right from your school performance to your current performance, and they have a way of projecting to what level you can grow in the organization. That was being done, but I think that luxury is no longer there in the companies today. They have to be much smarter and swifter to do that, and hence I feel the importance of assessment centers will grow. And further to that, within the organizations, after you have the employees, you cannot, to fill the other levels of the organizations, you cannot get too many employees outside available for lateral movement in the organization. Therefore, you need to also focus on development centers, which means the focus on L&D, or the pressure on L&D, is going to go up as we go forward. It gives you more opportunities. There will be many more opportunities for the L&D department, but then L&D department itself has to mature into a highly competent team of professionals, so that you are able to address these needs, and therefore the importance of development center. I hope I've been able to give you the right perspective on that. Let's move on to what are the principles of a development center. We have always been talking about multiple participants, multiple competencies, multiple observers or assessors or consultants, and multiple instruments. So all these things. So if you want to run a development center, or if you want to manage a development center, you need to manage all this in your organization. And multiple contexts, validation of instruments, how do you validate these instruments is very, very important. And that we are not getting into those methodologies. Validity and reliability are very important for any of the instrument to be used. And integration of SSRs, observations, and records to define clear inferences about the competencies. I think this is where the challenge is. This is not like the 360-degree feedback where you have got 5 different levels of people, your superior, your peers, your subordinates, your customers, like that. Here, these are all experts. They'll give you some opinion and some views based on observations on your behavior or competencies. And then all those things have to be collated to make some sense out of it and give a prescription to the organization as well as to the individual in terms of feedback, what needs to be done for the future, right? Specific competency-based feedback. And a competency-based feedback, again, I'm repeating it multiple times. See, most of the organizations, they give feedback, the bosses give feedback, but in my personal view and in my observations over a period of time, I've seen they give without having the finesse of a top-class professional. The feedback generally ends up as something related to the person, not to the competencies or the profession. And therefore, there is reluctance in accepting that feedback, and people come out of the boss's room and say, oh, yes, criticized me, he has done this, he has appreciated me. So it is not me as a person, it is my competence to be successful on my job. If the focus is on that, I think people will be very, very happy about it. So overall feedback-based development plan charted out upon development center completion and leading to an individual development plan, subsequently implementing that IDP is what makes a development plan a unique proposition for an organization, and that makes it more successful. Right? Now, what are the objectives for the development center? I think by now, most of you would have understood that you are looking at the right candidate for either future development of the positions, or in most cases, succession planning. Succession planning definitely requires a good amount of effort because that is for the key positions in the organization. Identifying the developmental needs of the candidates, that's not easy. What is perceived to be development need may not necessarily tally with the assessments and the outcomes there. And therefore, there is a huge gap. I will give you an example. Since I've been in the both the corporate side as well as the academic side for considerably long time, when you ask people to make a personal assessment of what training needs they have and what they rate and what actually we get out of the processes that I've been talking about are generally not the same. They are very, very different. And one of the common the big difference is the communication skills, stress management, time management. Everybody thinks that he is she is great about these things, but in reality, they are not really great. And it is very difficult for somebody at a mid-level manager. You ask him to go for a training program on soft skills or a communication skills training program, he will feel very reluctant. He thinks that I'm already up there. Why should I go? In fact, in one infrastructure company in Hyderabad, they engaged me for some such task. And one finding that we had was most of the top performing, highly earning in terms of incentive and things like that, business development managers, their communication skills are indeed very, very poor, but yet they're successful. Because they're successful, it is very difficult for you to convince them that you need to go through this. And that is because they think what they've achieved so far will make them achieve future growth. Unfortunately, it is not so. There is a saying, if you continue to do what you have been doing, you will continue to be where you are. So if you want to be somewhere in future, you need to be different, and that difference requires you to go through those upskilling or improving your competencies and acquired cognitive skills. Then the overall success of development center is whether you are able to demonstrate to the organization that the people are indeed being developed and the organization is able to retain its competitive position. Now, principles of development center design: clear and stated objectives. I mean, this requires a lot of guidance and inputs from the top management, either the CEO or the second level of the management. They must be very, very articulate in what the development center has to do and what it means for them. Identify the competency baseline, which again requires a lot of good amount of job analysis and that is related job analysis, not the traditional one, the job analysis which will help you to get the right competence, the baseline competencies. You can always define this is my baseline, and then the next level and the next level, 3 levels you can define. And then the commitment from that senior management and the support that is required, because sometimes you may have to take certain decisions which may not be palatable to the other line managers in the organization. So you must have the solid backing of the top management, without which you cannot objectively function as a development center head, and you cannot effectively manage. And feedback, which will lead to drawing an individual development plan, which is a teamwork, not one man's work. It's a teamwork. Then you must use the right kind of audience, whether you're doing it for the mid-level or the senior management, you're doing it for production or operations, factory level. I mean, that kind of what kind of an audience are you looking at? Because each audience, the requirements are different. And then how are you going to use the data that is generated in the development center? Now, if the data generated in the development center is going to be used as a weapon against a person, then nothing will happen. The whole effort will go waste. I think that is what previously we were discussing. Why this credibility crisis is there? That is because some people make use of it for wrong purposes. Then your entire credibility goes. Then defining the competency is not easy, and you have to have the expertise for defining these competencies. Only people with considerable amount of experience and having the eye for determining those competencies can do it. And whatever the competencies you are defining should be observable. Don't write something in abstract, because you may not be the person who actually will implement these development center processes. Therefore, anybody using those processes in the organization should be able to understand those things, and that is not an easy task. Then validity, at least, I mean, validity in the scientific sense is the best. If nothing else, at least you must have the face validity of the instruments that are using. If you don't have that, then it becomes a matter of a joke in the organization or in the development center. People will ridicule that. So please make sure that your instruments are valid or technically and scientifically, if not at least on the face of them. And multifold nature, by use multiple techniques, by multiple assessors and multiple participants, and make sure that you never send a signal contrary to being unbiased and very objective. So sometimes you need to, what are the tools used? Sometimes you need to use cognitive tools. Now, cognitive tools are used for what purposes? I think if the job requirement is, the competencies required needs you to be analytical thinker, logical reason, make logical reasoning, and you have to be a critical thinker. Your job involves a lot of problem solving. Then obviously these are all something to do with your cognitive processes, and therefore you need to use the cognitive tools. Now, they can also be used, cognitive tools can also be used for technical and functional competencies that require the participants to use their cognitive thinking skills. I think in today's world, where the organizations are more and more depending on for the AI-related implementation of their job processes, the cognitive skills actually start a little higher level. You know, anything that is routine can be done by machine, but anything that is non-routine, which requires a certain amount of decision making based on some data and their interpretation, requires the cognitive skills, and probably that will start somewhere around the mid-level management positions and above. And obviously, for those positions, you need to use the right instruments to determine what are the cognitive abilities of the individuals. Then interpersonal tools. The managerial function is mainly, apart from being technically sound, you must also have the interpersonal skills. The interpersonal skills actually carry you through the organizational processes. You must be able to work in teams, work with your superiors, work with your juniors, but work with your peers, and you must be able to lead teams. You should be able to lead leaders within the organization, and therefore your ability to deal with conflicting and complex situations has to be much higher, and hence you must definitely deploy some interpersonal tools in the organization. Where there are different tools. Now, this course doesn't have the scope of discussing all of them, and therefore we are not going into it. Then most of these people are connected to businesses. You are there to run the business, and we are discussing in the context of a business organization. And therefore, you must use some business related tools, which can be pretty complex to design, because you're not talking about one size does not fit all. For each industry, for each company, these requirements could differ, and therefore you must create some kind of simulations so that you are able to administer them appropriately and make some meaningful conclusions out of it. And then last one, but this is not the least one, which is very, very important, is whether you are able to give feedback in a constructive way. Feedback can be given in a very destructive way. If it is that way, the whole process of development center will fail. So how to give feedback, what to give, how do you make it insightful, how do you make the person receiving the feedback receive it, process it, use it, and improve on that, all depends on the feedback giver. We often blame, this is an attribution error, we often blame that this fellow doesn't take my feedback. We always put the onus on the receiver, but I think the giver is very, very important. We should move away from the attribution error and say that the buck stops with me. I am responsible for it. I must give the feedback in the right way. Yes, sir.
The study material contains even the construction of the statements while giving the feedback. It should be in the third person or second person, never as a first person, and so on. How does that affect the content or the message of the feedback? Thank you.
I think those things, it all depends on several factors. You know, the one, as I mentioned to you, the feedback giver. Suppose your immediate superior gives you some feedback, you may not immediately accept it or receive it. But the same thing comes from, let us say, two levels above. Some vice president gives you a feedback or a CEO gives you a feedback. The acceptability is much higher. Can you tell me why?
Uh, typically, I consider it as the majburi hai. You have to accept. You can't argue. That may be the one reason. Not always, but most of the times. Another thing is that we consider them as the authentic people to give feedback, or maybe more experienced or more experts in giving the feedback. Maybe. I don't know.
Okay, I think the authentic is the word. You know, if your leader is considered to be authentic, if your leader is considered to be open, if your leader is considered to be fair and objective, you will consider that to be more acceptable. Now, that is one reason. And when you are getting some feedback from a higher level, obviously he doesn't have any conflict of interest. You know, your immediate senior, if he gives, you can always suspect that this fellow is worried about my competence and I may replace him tomorrow. Therefore, he is giving me something which is not acceptable to me. And he may have that unconscious bias as well. You know, the individual concerned who is giving the feedback might also have some unconscious bias. But as you go up in the ladder and they give you the feedback, this unconscious bias level probably is not going to affect them because you are no longer no threat to them and their positions. And therefore, you consider that to be more acceptable, which number one. Number two, the context, how do you give feedback? Let us say constructive feedback. If you have to give feedback to your own trainee, let us say, you are all running training programs. You are heading the training departments or the institutes. If you have to give it feedback to your participant, how do you give actually? What goes into your thinking, thought process, when to give, how to give? Can anyone articulate that? You give the feedback just like that, or you have to plan for it? And then if you have to plan for
Uh,
it, how do you plan?
No, sir. I think while giving the feedback, the person giving the feedback should also put as to what is actually expected out of it. Say, for example, any behavior which is not acceptable, then what is the acceptable level in the given scenario? That would be, I think, would be more constructive feedback, I suppose.
Okay, anybody else? Please share your thoughts on that. This is very important. If you're dealing with development center management, I think you need to be very clear about this.
Because ultimately the purpose of giving feedback is to procure the improvement in that person's behavior or in the trait or in the outcome of his whatever. Thank you.
True, that is, yes. But then,
One thing I can mention that feedback should be given in a planned way. It should not come as a haphazard things in between any session. Like for training session also, it should come at the end of the training session when pre and post assessment is being done, when we have something or the other in our hand about the candidate, so that we can give them the feedback in a proper way. It should not come haphazardly in between training session or in between any break. It should have a proper timing. It should be done in a planned way.
very right, very right. Okay. Anybody else? Mayuri ma'am, you said you have gone through this training. Any
Yes, yes.
perspectives?
Sure, sir. So basically, I think when you look at it typically from a trainer's perspective, when there's a feedback given, I think, or any other, as a manager, if you're giving a feedback, I think most important is that the feedback has to be about that particular situation or any incident. It can't just be generic. It has to be on that, because what is important is why feedbacks often get rejected, because people don't find value in the feedback that has been given. And for that, it has to be very, very specific: what happened, why it happened, how it could have been done in a different way. Also, I think it's important to take into consideration the reaction of the participant by ensuring that there is a two-way communication rather than trying to dump the feedback on an individual, because then it comes from a very different space. The person starts taking it very personal and goes into various instances. Whereas the feedback is about a particular situation, it's about a particular requirement, it's about a particular behavior or a skill or an expectation. And I think it has to be made more cohesive, which means that it is about how can we work together to improve this, rather than saying that it doesn't shouldn't sound like a reprimand. I think those are some very basic essentials of feedback, that the first reaction to feedback is rejection. I mean, if somebody tells me that I'm fat, I will obviously not accept it. But if it is put in a very different way, probably I'll start considering what the person says, and it has to be made to sound or not sound, it has to be genuine. I think it's very important to make the person understand that the feedback is for the development and the benefit of the person. Look at it more from a long term perspective than a particular instant which might irritate the person as to why am I getting a feedback. So I think I have said too many things, but the point is, I think it has to be precise, it has to be about a particular situation, it has to be made in such a way that the person who the feedback is being given to should think about improvement rather than taking it negative.
Right. Thank you. I think you all have given the right kind of inputs on that. Uh, First of all, I think the feedback giver should do enough homework before calling somebody and say, I'm sitting with you for giving you feedback. And you should really mean what you say, each word of you. It's not just for the sake of feedback or because you have the authority to give feedback. You're not giving because you're concerned about the person. And then you an observed set of behaviors in the person, therefore you're giving it. And the context in which you are giving is, I want you to be more successful in the job. Maybe some of them may also help me to be successful in my life, but then the purpose here is to be made made successful in the on the job. And don't call somebody and then, as Mayuri ma'am said, it has to be a conversation. It should not be, I am your boss, you listen to me, and tomorrow majburi hai, you have to just hear me out and then get out. No, it's not that. It's a conversation. You have to engage the feedback receiver. You have to make them believe that, yes, it is in your interest. I think all this, there is enough and more research on feedback giving and feedback reception, positive feedback, negative feedback. Sometimes how a negative feedback leads to a positive outcome. Sometimes even a positive feedback can also have some negative consequences. All these things are enough research is there, but we will not get into that. Right now, I think it is important to know that feedback is an important mechanism or an important part of the entire development center, and it must be insightful and impact making. Yeah, thumb rules for development center design. I think these are very, very essential. Each competency must be measured at least twice using different tools. That is what we have been talking about: multiple tools, multiple measurements, multiple SSRs and all that. So this is just to make sure that you do not go wrong and you will not make any errors. And each exercise must not measure more than 3 or 4 competencies. That is again to make sure that the SSRs are focused on measuring those competencies. If you have got too many competencies, it is very, very difficult to focus on them. And therefore, you make sure that your design of your activities or events in the development center are made in such a way that you do not make more than 2 or 3, or at best 3 or 4 competencies in particular event. And participants should display their competencies and proficiency in all settings, not in one, whether it is a group activity or whether it is an individual activity or a one-on-one activity. They must. Therefore, it requires a lot of thought. Designing a development center is not a simple task. It is not like creating an event or a role play or a case study. I think what goes into that role play or what kind of a case study is created is very, very important. I think these are the thumb rules. Now, how do you validate? I think designing tools in such a way sufficient time is provided along with the sufficient opportunity for the display of the behaviors in the participant. You cannot hurry up, and the behaviors can come out only under certain situations, under certain time frames. So therefore, you cannot say you have to finish it and pressurize the participants in that. And each tool provides an equal opportunity for all the participants. I think that is very important. If you are conducting let us say an activity related to case study, and the participants come from different industries, and the case study is of a specific industry related to some part of the participants, obviously it may have some advantage to them. So even selection of a case study, selection of an activity, selection of a role play has to be done very, very carefully. It should not lead to advantage to some and disadvantage to the others because they do not have prior knowledge or experience in that. It is always better to have something neutral to everyone so that the real competencies can come out of them. And then tools must be used as standard mechanism across all the DC batches, development center batches. You cannot keep changing. You have to have consistency, cohesion, so that the results are comparable. Here, your decisions are going to be based on relative performance of others, and therefore your result should be comparable. And don't miss out on why your development center exists. What are the objectives of that? Don't deviate from that. Then competency is what you're measuring. Don't keep on compromising on what you're measuring. They must be uniformly measured for set of people. The same cohort should have the same set of competencies being measured. And then setting in which the tools are employed, don't keep changing. The tool, if it is deployed in two different settings, the results can be very different. And therefore, you must be sensitive to that and use those in a similar situation or a similar context. Now, this is very important. The tool must be created or designed on situations which are either completely away from the business environment or completely in line with the business. Either all the participants are familiar with what tools they are using, or it is alien to all the participants. If some are familiar and some are not familiar, the situations and the context, then it will lead to some kind of biased assessment, and that will not fulfill the requirements of the purpose for which you are conducting the development center. While creating and validating the tools, one must put down the measurement criteria. How many times do you expect the behavior to show up? What will be the intensity of behavior? And what would be the different ways in which the behavior would be displayed? Because the designer may be different from the people who are actually making the observations. So at the time, that is why we always say in development center, you must have some pilot done before you finalize on that, so that you are able to validate the activities that that are being conducted in the development center, so that there is consistency in all the results. If you don't pilot it, then it is possible that you may be leading to a wrong conclusion. Now, I have also put in this PPT that completes the discussion on the development center for today's purpose. And the next session, we will take the remaining part forward. But I think for the understanding of each one of you, I have put the glossary here. So I would request you to read this. And then if you have any questions, you can ask me, because this will be a quick reference for you during your test or something like that. Your conceptual clarity will be higher. Yeah, please read that.
Sir, may I ask you something?
Yes.
Please?
Yes.
Sir, you have mentioned competency-based feedback, right, during our discussion today. So can you please come up with any example where I can understand clearly what is competency-based feedback, how it is being given to the participants? I mean, one or two examples.
Okay. Certainly, yes. Definitely. I have been involved in training since I've been in the academic field. For any training needs analysis, first training program planning, we used to do the training needs analysis. I used to have people who will circulate some formats and ask them to conduct the training needs analysis. And there are two things that we used to do. One is collect the data from the individual faculty members or the teachers, all of them at higher education, not in the school education. And commonly asked question is rate yourself on the communication skills. Invariably, everybody will put themselves at the highest level. Maybe if it is a scale of 1 to 5, it will be 4 or 5 at the individual level, the rating. Then we ask the principal or the head of that particular institution's college where they are working, and the rating from them would be maybe at 2 or 3, or in some rare cases maybe 1. Now you look at the perspective, the perception that you have about yourself and the perception you have from the supervisor is completely different. Now, when you do the analysis, maybe out of, let us say, 500 people, I'm just giving you a ballpark figure, maybe for 200 people, you have identified that they require communication skills. Right? Now, you are going to tell somebody who has been teaching day in and day out to the higher education students that, look, you need to improve your communication skills. When my perception is that I am already great. Right? So you ask them to come for a training program. The first thing they come with the mind, they come to the training program on the first day, their body language just speaks all this, They will think that I have been sent here for punishment. They will not consider that I lack this competence of being a good communicator. I am already teaching. My students are doing well. My students are graduating. Why the hell do I need to train them? Now, you have to correct that mindset, give them the inputs, and demonstrate to them that at the end of the training program, your communication skills have improved. And not all 200 will improve. Some people will not improve. Now, some people, let us say some 5% or whatever. If they don't improve, if you have to communicate this to them, how will you do it? Competence requirement is communication skills. Perception, self-perception is I am great. Supervised perception is you are not great. Training center is required to intervene and improve your communication skills. And at the end of the training program, the investment is made on them, and yet they don't improve. How do you give this feedback to them? I hope I made the point clear.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think this is this is just one example. There are several such experiences that I have gone through. Very tough. As Jagannath ji said, sometimes you have to show your authority and say you have to do it and make them feel that it's majburi because you are accountable for the organization. But then, given enough time and resources, you have to give it in the right way. Sometimes you have to use multiple ways of doing it. Okay. Yeah, the second slide of glossary, I think this will give you the gist of what we have done for quick reference. So you can quickly look at it and ask me if you have any questions. Because they may close this call anytime. It is 9:55. I think 10 o'clock you have a class. They simply shut it off anytime. Last week it happened. Yeah, any other questions from anybody else? Are you conceptually clear what is an assessment center? What is a development center? What goes into designing a development center? What processes happen in a development center? Are you clear about it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Madam? Yeah, okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. And anybody else? Others are not speaking. Tiaji?
Yes, sir. Understood.
You understood?
Understood. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, great. Padma Priya madam,
Yes, sir. Clear.
clear?
Yes, sir. Clear.
Asta madam, Dilip Kumar Rai ji, Rajni Kumar ji.
Yes, sir, it's understood.
Understood? Okay. Yeah, no questions on this glossary. But for the next class, by the time we meet next Sunday, I want you to do a little bit of thinking more on this. And if your organization has some processes, at least come back and share your experience there. And if you don't have any organization, at least try to understand, talk to any of your contacts and find out what happens in a development center in their organization, either within the organization or set up outside, so that we are able to get some practical perspectives into the classroom. I think we are almost done. We still have another 2-3 minutes. We can engage in some clarifications before we close the call, or we don't have to close. The call will be closed by the central office. Yeah.
Yeah, I have another query.
Yeah.
Sir,
Please go ahead.
in the assessment center, we came to know that this is basically used for recruitment and for giving promotion. But I mean, promotion is also part of performance management, right? So why it is not being taken into development center? I mean, through development center also we can promote somebody and they can be taken for succession planning. But why this promotion thing is being kept into assessment center, not into development center?
No. Assessment, it goes into the assessment center and is used for the purpose of identifying the gaps. See, development center makes basically development plan, but it doesn't give you an assessment and say, okay, these are all the gaps I'm giving you. I mean, the people are using, because of expediency for the talent requirement, people are using assessment centers because the cost is pretty clear and it is done by somebody and they give you an output. It gives you a report where the concerned person requires an amount of training or gaps, and fixing the gaps goes to the development center. So development center need not necessarily work on identifying the gaps all the time. That is the only reason. Otherwise, primarily assessment center is a recruitment based activity or talent acquisition based activity. Okay. Yeah. All right. So I think before your other class starts, then we can close. We have got another minute, and so you have a minute's break before you go to the next class. I know you have got back-to-back classes from morning to evening. So wish you a very happy weekend learning. All right.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Till we meet again. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.